Thank you very much, all of you, for joining. I just want to mention that we are going to be watching Q&A, so I'll be taking a look at that to see what questions come in, but I've got a huge list of questions to ask you, so we'll see what we can get through. We are going to also record this and post it later so that other people who can't attend right now are going to watch. And for everyone who is attending, we do have a door prize, which Kathy will announce at the end of this this particular session. And one last little note is the 5 o'clock that we have later on today, which really focuses on the services that are available for entrepreneurs in Erie, in the Erie region, will also be providing to those attendees a guide to a lot of the components of Erie's ecosystem. Call it a beta of something we're going to be developing in the future too, which is really large and encompassing, using a lot of student talent to develop kind of a real comprehensive map. So I think what I'd love to do is start out with kind of a few targeted questions. But before we get to that, for everyone who is attending, today we have 3 great guests from 3 different cities in Pennsylvania. From Erie, we have our own Brian Slaywin, portfolio manager, director of Ben Franklin Technology Partners of Northwest Pennsylvania. And a lot of you are probably familiar with him, but he handles a lot of Ben Franklin's activities in doing seed funding and even pre-seed funding for entrepreneurs in this region. He's also a very strong supporter of the community and a kind of a staple in that group of people. So if you need a first contact in Erie and you got an idea, you want to know who to get connected with, he's your guy. From Pittsburgh, amongst other things, we have Don Morrison, and Don Morrison was kind enough years ago to give me a tour of Pittsburgh's co-working spaces, and this is a man who's got the keys to all those buildings and knows a lot of basically all of the real components of that system that make it work so well for developing entrepreneurship in Pittsburgh. So I appreciate very much his attendance. He was also a major component of building the company American Eagle, and some years ago gave a great talk to a lot of my own students about building a brand. So he's an expert in that field as well. Lastly, we've got Skylar Yost. He is from York, Pennsylvania, a city that has a lot in common with Erie. And he is an ecosystem builder there, working with that community, building upon technology clusters and building upon that region's fortes, much like we try to build upon in Erie and grow upon as well. And feel free to amend that with anything or correct that with anything you think is useful. First question I'd like to ask Don. Pittsburgh has been growing its entrepreneurship community for quite some time. They're quite ahead of, in fact, most cities that I've looked at in terms of building a strong ecosystem. What do you think were some of the major factors that contributed to that kind of rapid, extensive growth in Pittsburgh?
Well, when the steel industry collapsed in the 80s and 90s, Pittsburgh was really on its heels from an economic standpoint. But we were fortunate to have what I consider to be some of Pittsburgh's natural resources, which are 2 tier 1 research universities between Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh. Between the 2 schools, there's over $1 billion of funded research. And that funded research really drove a lot of innovation especially at CMU initially, and more recently at the University of Pittsburgh. So that was sort of the foundation of the ecosystem. And then we were very fortunate to have very progressive organizations like Innovation Works, which is a state-funded equivalent of Ben Franklin in Southwest Pennsylvania, became the top seed funder in the area, and then ultimately creating Alpha Lab, which was one of the first business accelerators in this region. I want to say it's maybe about 10 years old now, but within a very short period of time, Alpha Lab became a top nationally ranked accelerator. And it was a combination of very innovative programming for the teams that were selected. Plus, I think what's made Alpha Lab successful is the mentors that they recruited to surround these teams with gray-haired, scar-tissued people like me who have made all the mistakes one can make in business. And I think that combination is really accelerated. And since I think I took you on the e-tour of Pittsburgh, we've just had more and more components added to that ecosystem. But at the foundation, I think we were very fortunate to have two tier one research schools as the sort of the base.
Thank you. That is very helpful. I feel like we can share some of that that excitement here as well. My next question is for Skylar.
Well, do you mind if I stick my
Brian,
toe
jump
in here? I think Don points out to a path that any city can take. It typically starts off with a couple of people who have an interesting idea and they keep sharing it and it keeps growing. And entrepreneurs certainly have a very important role in all of that. I think if you look at what's happened in Erie, just in my short time here, and certainly extending well before I got here, you had people who were starting to get together and starting to do things. A great example of that in Erie is the Innovation Beehive Network. It was just an idea and someone had to believe, and Perry Wood and ECRA founded the initial, and Jake and Amy at Barron, and then it's grown and it's grown, and now it's really a thing. And so it all starts off with a couple of folks around a beer probably with an idea. And then you gather more and more momentum as you gain more and more success. So I guess my encouragement to the entrepreneurs would be is what's your big idea? Not just a company that you're interested in growing, but also what are you doing to develop a community around you that can actually support your individual idea. I think Skylar can share a ton of information about what's going on in York if you've paid any attention about what's going on in York. I mean, they're growing like a weed. Maybe Skylar, if you don't mind chiming in, but Don's pointed out something very important. It starts off with a couple of people willing to start the idea.
Yeah, I'd love to hop in and say something about that. But I think you get to the crux of it is it's really about social connections and building a network of people who are willing to work together and help each other and share experiences. Because the places that have lowest rates of entrepreneurship are the places where people believe that entrepreneurs do it on their own. I mean, frankly. So ecosystem building to me is all about building those institutional structures that facilitate social networks and social connections and knowledge transfer across different social groups, whether that's socioeconomic, whether that's, one of the big focuses in York is we have huge de facto segregation, and we're working to find ways to create more opportunity for minority entrepreneurs and be able to get them sales from companies that they have no relations with. So that social structure is absolutely vital.
Yeah, I would agree. And it doesn't have to be just your local community. I mean, Don has made immeasurable contributions all up and down the I-79 corridor, from Mercer and Hermitage to what's going on here in Erie. Skylar has been critical. There's a new venture fund in Erie tied to Erie Insurance Group called Arcturus. Skylar was critical in bringing that to the awareness of our community. So it really, it starts with two folks, it grows a little bigger. Now it's the community, and now all of a sudden it's across the Commonwealth. So I completely agree. It's about getting together, continuing to work together, and leveraging that social capital.
One of the things that's helped Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh is an extraordinarily collaborative community. There's a lot of competition amongst different support organizations and politics, but from the very beginning of the ecosystem, when I first became involved about 10 years ago now, I would go to events sponsored by one group for another, and I would see everybody. I call them the usual suspects in the ecosystem. We're all there supporting each other's events. And so it starts with a few people, but I think, people who are genuinely interested in supporting innovation and entrepreneurship really create that community, regardless of the titles or official structures of different entities. It's really about a group of people with a common cause. I think collaboration is one of Pittsburgh's keys to success.
Do you think that within the entrepreneur community themselves that it's natural for them to build that community and serve each other, relate to each other, or do you think that that is something that doesn't occur so naturally and you have to encourage or enable that?
That's a good question. I can only speak from my experience, but the specific individuals who were there, from the beginning, all seemed to share some common values. It wasn't like somebody, passed around, okay, here's our core beliefs. It was sort of intuitive that, innovate. We all loved innovation. We all loved entrepreneurs, and we wanted to do whatever we could to support the ecosystem. I have to really tip my hat to, what Brian has done in Erie. When I first joined Blue Tree about 8 or 9 years ago, we were getting our Erie membership up and running, and I was going up to Erie, a couple times a year for some of our Blue Tree meetings. And, we'd have our meetings, which was, you could count the people on one hand. I was there just to have another warm breathing body in the room. But a incubator, I think, at Gannon University, and that was about the extent of Erie's startup ecosystem. And last year I came up, and Brian took me on the Erie eco tour, and I was just amazed at how many resources have popped up in the last few years. So it can happen anywhere, whether you have a tier 1 research university or not. It's really about like-minded people creating these resources for entrepreneurs to get the nourishment they need, whether it's mentorship or seed funding or combinations.
And I agree, Don. What I find is that it comes in, it's sort of cyclical. So in the beginning, and when you're starting your entrepreneurial journey, you're collaborative, you're attending every event, you're going to everything, you're reaching out to everyone. And then the market figures it out, right? Here's the core of what can be helpful to me. And then you start to focus in. And then as you see some success, now you begin to hopefully contribute outward again. So you're continuing to recycle that energy. I think that's a very natural occurrence. And I completely agree. Usually it's people, I think of Radius Co-work all the time when I think of, well, how did that happen? Well, it happened because a bunch of people with common interests decided they wanted to all be working in the same place together. And that's typically how an ecosystem will grow as well. You get a couple of people with an idea and they find more people who are interested in the same thing. So I think the key really is to continue to be open to people coming in and contributing and being open to, like, all ideas are good ideas, right? They may not fit now, but they'll eventually fit at some point.
In these communities, do you think that there's any, I don't call them a type of entrepreneur, but a business type that tends to get left out in the cold or glossed over, or, you know, is there a group of business seeking individuals that don't get enough attention?
I mean, honestly, I feel like there's an element of businesses focused on coding of some sort get a lot more attention than their impact might be. Sometimes in our community, it's heavy manufacturing and you know, very high tech manufacturing. We have companies here that are competing against China and Switzerland to produce hundreds of thousands of tiny parts over and over again. They do a very good job. We have a lot of people who are in the trenches starting new businesses and finding new export markets in the manufacturing world that don't get a lot of attention until they have huge hires. And it's very capital intensive. It's really a huge process for them to go through. But you know, the few companies we have that are sort of app enabled, which are not very large, they're the ones that get invited to talk at all the entrepreneurship panels and stuff that, you know, had been happening. And there's very much this division in people's mind that that technology needs to be coding and apps. And if it's not that, then it's not part of the tech entrepreneurship scene. I think one of the biggest things that I've tried to stress in that the network of people that I've pieced together over time has really opened people's eyes to is any and every business should be a part of your startup scene if what you're trying to do is elevate the level of community understanding of how to start a business and how to scale a business. Because places that don't have a fairly high community understanding of it are unlikely to produce a unicorn eventually. So
I think what Skylar's touching on is very important. You know, good ideas don't have any geographical parameters. They can come from anywhere. I think the key is really providing access to resources to those entrepreneurs, whether they're in a major city like Pittsburgh or, you know, rural community like Mercer County. Brian and I served on the board of an organization that had two amazing programs. The East Center at Linden Point, Hermitage, had an incubator and accelerator program. And the students and the teams that were in there were amazing. And we just brought resources to bear on those entrepreneurs in a rural community. Two of our alums, one, Rooted Beauty, had an exit already. They took that company and sold it. Gecko Robotics, which started out at the East Center, I think they're on their second or third round of funding right now. They were eventually brought into Y Combinator, which is one of the nation's largest accelerator programs. But they got their start at, in rural Pennsylvania. So I think the challenge for entrepreneurs is to be able to access the resources. And there's a lot of resources out there. It's really just a matter of knowing where to find them.
And, Skylar, you point out something, coding and apps and web and big venture fund, venture raises, and we hired 10 people. That's all really cool and sexy, right? Like it gets you on the news, gets you in the newspaper. Your mom will even take your phone call because you seem like you're a success now. It's a big deal. The 2-person slaving away in the garage startup is just as important, frankly, arguably more important than the big company or the company that looks like it's on the rise. In Erie, and I know it's true in York as well as Pittsburgh, diversity has become, as it should have been a long time ago, much more paid attention to. So we've at Ben Franklin have been working with a lot of members of our community to make sure that those resources that Don and Skylar talked about are available, not equally spread, but equitably spread, so that people who need what they need when they need it can actually get at it. And that's really important. The diversity, and I'll call us out right now. This panel is a good example of what diversity doesn't look like. But having a very diverse set of companies who have access to resources is vitally important for every community to really grow their entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that's super important.
One other thing I just wanted to reinforce is there's a lot of technology that's considered sexy and angel investable, and that's true. We have a lot of artificial intelligence and robotics and autonomous vehicle technology, computer science. Those are great, but innovation, you could have an idea, it might not be a unicorn potential, but it's going to start up a business, be a sustainable business, create jobs, and make a nice living. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And
Perfect.
a really robust
Perfect.
ecosystem will support all entrepreneurs, not just the angel fundable. Now, if you have what we call a lifestyle business, that's perfectly fine. It will be more difficult to get funding for those types of businesses, but that's where organizations like Ben Franklin come in for seed funding, because their mission is economic development, whether you're a unicorn potential or not. So I think really robust ecosystems support and celebrate all entrepreneurship of all types.
Yeah, and there's a lot there where you can't really predict when a lifestyle business might transition to a scalable business, or vice versa. It happens all the time. So you have to be supportive in order to allow those chances to happen. And there was something we touched on a little bit earlier about the level of diversity of this panel and just in general of startup ecosystems. It's really hard to predict what type of business or what person has the wherewithal and acumen to be successful in a community and culture that is not one that you are a part of. So that's one of those reasons why social networks are absolutely vital. You have to build relationships across gaps so that you have all sorts of trusted resources to be able to connect people to. And I believe one of the questions in the chat was about connecting refugees to resources. And I'll say that is, to my mind, one of the biggest things is refugees come into a community with no social networks. It's not just that they have to learn the process of officially getting assistance. It's that they don't have trusted people in the local area that knows how to access resources. So finding ways to build denser relationships is absolutely key to making the official process way smoother. And to my mind, this is 100% tied to building communities where there's more face-to-face interaction. I mean, COVID makes it hard, but walkable places and Radius is a great example in Erie of having a co-working space. People see each other every day. It's right in the middle of town. You see people through osmosis walking around town. Bridging the gaps between neighborhoods that are de facto segregated and creating more social interactions will help those same, fill the gaps where people don't know how to find resources.
I want to jump in because Nikan Carpenter was the person that asked this question. Nikan actually works for the City of Erie Mayor's office, and she is the liaison between the City of Erie and the refugee and immigrant community. And just yesterday, Erie was named the 10th in the whole country, the 10th certified welcoming places in America's city. And that was efforts that Nikan and her group did to it was a 2-year project, right? It was a 2-year project that there were all kinds of things that needed to be done, and Nikan rallied the troops and marshaled the resources. And yesterday it was announced that Erie was the 10th city in America. So congratulations to Nikan for that. And I think that opens the door to exactly what Skylar and Dom, you're both pointing to. There needs to be a way for people who don't have social capital and don't have those natural built up networks to access the resources that are available. From a Ben Franklin perspective, and I don't know if she's in the room, I thought I saw her, a woman named Trish Digliato, who runs an organization called Paramount Pursuits. You've got to go to where your target is, right? So my responsibility isn't to sit in my office waiting for people to call me. My responsibility is to go to where people are who might be entrepreneurs that don't look like the entrepreneurs that normally come to me. That's our responsibility. So it's kind of both ways. We've got to be shown the pathway by folks like Nikan and others. And then we have to be able to make that journey and build the relationships and build, frankly, trusting relationships in order for the first, all we're looking for is one. Once we get one, then we'll get two, and then we'll get 10, and then we'll get dozens. That's the key, is we need a guide to get us there, and then we have to be willing to go there.
Thank you. That was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for also addressing that question. What do you think, shifting gears slightly, what do you think is a danger or a pitfall that a community of entrepreneurs can encounter that can derail this process of really improving the community and making progress toward a great ecosystem?
Well,
I have
we've
some
already,
thoughts here. Oh, go ahead, Don.
go ahead,
Please.
Skylar.
Okay, so there are a few things. One, there's a lesson that I learned from visiting Erie and speaking to some of your folks who have been building trust among decision makers for a very long time. That is a model for other communities. Most communities, their decision makers from different organizations don't speak to each other. One of the things that was said was, when somebody violates the kind of trusting relationship that you have to jettison. There's a level of coming back and making sure that you protect the culture that you're building. And there have been a couple key instances where individuals have acted not in good faith, where there's a what do I get out of it best sort of way, and it forces you in this path of like, you must have contracts in place before agreeing in principle to something. You can't trust the word of someone. That is a very dangerous game to play. Places that have good entrepreneurship environments have the ability to trust. You have a trusting relationship where you can believe that this in principle agreement you have is going to stick down the road when it actually has to. So that's the first thing that I'll say about that, and I'll let you go, Don.
Well, that's a great point. One of the things we've already talked about is the falling into the trap where only certain types of innovation are sexy or should be supported, and the reality is all innovation really should be supported. One of the things I just want to give a plug for, Brian and I were very fortunate to have been involved with the Linden Point Development Corporation, which, as I mentioned before, operated the E-Center at Linden Point, which was, a fairly traditional accelerator, but it was happened to be in a rural community. But the other program we had under our umbrella was the Entrepreneurship Academy, where we brought in high school seniors from 12 local high schools and basically taught them entrepreneurship. And again, talk about diversity. These kids came from every conceivable background and income level, but the ideas they came up with were, they were incredible. They were equal to some of the ideas I see at Alpha Lab, which are, wicked smart kids coming right out of CMU or Pitt. And these are kids, from rural Pennsylvania. They just had access to, someone to show them the entrepreneurial process, and they were taken on field trips, and we had guest speakers come in and talk to them. We had people from Tesla come in, actually brought in some of their cars. We had people from Microsoft. The head diversity person from Microsoft said she'd talk to our kids for 15 minutes. I think she was on for 45 minutes. So, I think it's just a matter of creating an ecosystem and providing resources. When you do that, good things are going to happen.
Completely agree. We're so fortunate in Erie. Don, you mentioned it earlier, the Erie Technology Incubator at Gannon, which is run by some really stellar people. That is a big piece of the entrepreneurial environment. They provide resources and physical facilities and mentors and, through relationships, access to capital and all the other stuff that you need when you're going. A friend of mine says this all the time. You get an idea, it starts in your dorm room. Your first office is likely a co-working space, but then it becomes a real thing. So where do you need to go? Well, places like ETI, right here in downtown. So yeah, we're so fortunate that Gannon is in the middle of our city. They have this amazing resource. It's run by a really good friend of mine, Brad Gleason, who is just stellar. And now they're taking that concept and they've got a whole building now that is going to be called the IHAC building, which is going to be another level up. So you're right. It's having those resources and making them available and making it known that all are welcome here is really critical.
So having the resources and making them, enabling all the entrepreneurs to know how to find them, I think that's a challenge. I'll ask, you a question, Jake. What is being done in Erie or other ecosystems to communicate all the different resources that are there? Is there a website, or you just ask everybody to call Brian or call Jake? I mean, what's the communication tree look like?
Yeah, it's a super good question. And the bottom line is that the way that our ecosystem is designed in Erie, you can't make a mistake by going to any of the organizations. We say, and I'm stealing this from Brian, but Brian, it's accurate. The phrase is no wrong door. You cannot enter the ecosystem at a wrong door. If you go to the SBDC, if you go to any one of our 4 universities, if you go to the Chamber or Bridgeway Capital or Ben Franklin, it doesn't matter. We're going to direct you to the right thing. So part of that is building that within that ecosystem is making sure that everyone knows about everyone else and that we have such a trusting and developed relationships that I can in a second text Brian and be like, Brian, I've got this person absolutely needs to talk to you. And at the same time, we're also helping navigate a system that is big and can be intimidating. So we're working on more online resources to make that a little bit more easily visualizable. We've tried to visualize the system in Erie in particular in the past, and it's a large, it's still intimidating. Even visualized, it's still intimidating and scary. So one of the things that we try to do for you is navigate that. And not just giving you advice, but saying, this is definitely something that you need to take advantage of and a person you need to speak to. There are web resources as well. I mean, the Beehive network, for example, we have our own website, nwpabeehive.com, and Google actually finds most of the resources in Erie. So the other thing that I say often about our ecosystem in Erie is that Google is our friend. If you go looking for resources in Erie as an entrepreneur, you will find them.
Let me, I'm gonna steal off of Jake's good idea here. So for an entrepreneur, and I know that most of the people in the room are an entrepreneur, or our entrepreneurs. The idea behind no wrong door is it doesn't matter whose door you knock on. It literally does not matter, because it's not your responsibility to figure out how the ecosystem works. That's my job and Skylar's job and Don's job and Jake's job and Brian Fuller, who runs the Beehive and many other things at Mercyhurst, and Brad and names, Trish and all the others. Our job is to be connected in a way that if an entrepreneur approaches any of us, our responsibility is to make sure that we listen to them, we understand what their opportunities are, and we either accelerate that person within our organization or we direct them to the exact right place they need to go next. So it's not a series of handoffs and emails and phone calls and good luck. It's no wrong door. It doesn't matter whose door you knock on. So literally just knock on any door. And I am waiting for somebody to build the Erie ecosystem map, right? Jake talks about this map, right? Which got all these pins. If you're looking for money, here are the 6 pins. If you're looking for offices, here are the 6 pins. I'm not going to call him out, but he keeps talking that he's going to build it. He's in the room. I'm not going to say who it is, but I cannot wait for that map to show up in Erie, because there's other cities, St. Louis specifically is the one I'm aware of, where it's just a beautiful map. So a person who's in the room who said you're going to build it, we need it.
Stay tuned, stay tuned. And appropriately, that's being built as a collaborative project. So
I think if you have such a map, what it will do, I agree with the idea there's no such thing as a wrong door. In many cases, entrepreneurs reach out and are frustrated because the door they knock on isn't what they're looking for, and everybody's very helpful and will say, well, you should really go talk to this person or that person. But if you can create a map where they get closer to where they want to be, it will lessen some of the frustration of the entrepreneurs. I think everybody in the ecosystem itself is very collaborative, but I know there's a lot of anxiety and frustration if you knock on too many doors and not any of those doors. So you can create a map where entrepreneurs have a pretty good idea. Don't come to Blue Tree for your pre-seed funding, because we'll want to see some traction. You talk to Innovation Works or Ben Franklin, and that's where you get your start. We'd be happy to talk to you once you get some traction. So I think, a lot of it is just knowing doors to, it shouldn't be the right doors, but the most appropriate door to knock on.
Well, and I want to touch on that a little bit, because there's one thing that you guys are all talking about here that is really impressive in functioning like further developed ecosystems. So York has a lot of activity going on in the private sector. There's a lot of strength. We're the center of central south central Pennsylvania's manufacturing cluster, which is sort of the underlying driver of our economy in an area that is about the same size as Pittsburgh. Just, there are 4 or 5 cities that are centers there instead of one city in the center. So it's hard to get the recognition of Pittsburgh. But what we don't have is, and this gets back to Jake's question about what are the dangers. We don't have as many people who are directly familiar with the person that you should be speaking to. So we don't have as many handoffs. We do have tribalism and territory and turf, and every community has that issue. It's just when you find paths around it and start to build networks where people help first instead of saying this should be mine, or we can do that too, why would you go over there? That is a very important thing, and that's one of those things that I think that Innovation Beehive should really be commended for. Building a network of organizations that normally don't play nice in other communities. Like we have issues in York with getting our universities to work directly together, or at least to not say no, like if you come to us, we're going to do that bit. Like, you don't need to go over there. So yeah, commend you guys. And also it's good to understand that culture of knowing each other and feeling comfortable handing off is super important.
Well, that challenge is always ongoing. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about overcoming those territorialism perceptions. Don, do you have any thoughts in Pittsburgh? I'm less familiar about it. What kind of a sense do you get there, and what kind of things have helped solve that there?
Well, as I said earlier, Jake, the Pittsburgh ecosystem is very collaborative. And again, if you go back to the base that's driving a lot of the innovation, the two, tier one universities, CMU and Pitt. When I first got involved in the startup ecosystem, CMU was far and away the premier school in terms of spinning out that funded research into real companies. Pitt, on the other hand, had huge, it was one of the top universities in the country as far as funded research, but the amount of that research that was actually getting commercialized was very, very small until Chancellor Gallagher came on several years ago, and he just said, hey, we've got to get with the program, and they really revamped their commercialization strategy and philosophy and made it much more like CMU's. So, there was this initial rivalry between these two big behemoths, but, you've got really innovative leaders like Babs Carrier, who runs the Big Idea Center, which is a student entrepreneurship program at Pitt's Innovation Institute, and people like Kit Needham, who run Project Olympus, which is CMU's student accelerator. They're collaborating now. In fact, during Global Entrepreneurship Week, there were several collaborative events where Pitt students and CMU students were combined onto teams to compete with one another, not the two schools per se, but blended teams from students from both schools. So, it gets back to the willingness and the intent to collaborate. You can decide to be territorial or tribal, as Schuyler says, or you can decide to be collaborative. And I think Pittsburgh keeps pushing that a little bit further, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's such a robust ecosystem.
A great question that's related to this came in the Q&A. Trish, thank you for that. What do you do if there is a component of the system that refuses to collaborate, or what if there what if there is a situation where several of them just won't? Is there what would you advise?
You build something that does not depend on them. I mean, basically, you find individuals that are interested in doing something cool, something interesting, interested in doing. That's the key, and you build something that does not depend on those blocks, and the momentum that you build will likely beget some other momentum somewhere else, and eventually, there's enough momentum happening that the blocks are like, hey, wait. We want to be a part of this. Or, maybe somebody at their organization somewhere else is saying, hey, we want to be a part of this. And then finally the organization says to that person, like, you need to be helpful here. So, I mean, I know just as a very basic example, I've been trying to get a strong sort of applied research apparatus constructed in York. And, a lot of it's been based on sort of some of the industry partnerships that Barron has, that there's just so much applied research being the best way to connect your local industry with the best practices elsewhere, and potentially get the researchers understanding what's going on and able to produce patents and see opportunities within that process where they could say, well, I could solve this problem for this industry here. And and it's usually industry paid for, which is great. It's a lot easier to, poof applied research out of the air than it is to poof an R1 research institution. So, I've been going down this path for a while, and Penn State York has been really interested in it, but they don't have funds to do it, and they don't have an apparatus to do it within the organization. York College has been sort of on the edge. They want to do some stuff on their own. They want to do their own piece of it and have a research park of their own, also modeled on Penn State Barron. But the challenge that I've faced is I want to just be able to create something that allows local industry to contract for R&D in the local market, and doesn't have to have researchers on staff already. We can find them, put them together, and subcontract them, and they can be university professors at either institution. It does not have to be a heavy duty contract through one of the universities. And those professors can bring in students to be a part of it. And we can use researchers from other markets and cross-pollinate our organizations. So, that I tried really hard to get traction on that specific idea with the powers that be for a while. And, I'm within a month of legal formation of a nonprofit that's doing that. We already have a space. We have all these structures in place to achieve it. Now it's just, going out and implementing and showing the universities that this will not be a competitor to what they want to do. This will be a value added, and it will clearly benefit their recruitment, because their professors will have opportunities and their students will have opportunities.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm a big fan of the a rising tide floats all boat idea. Oh, if we take a look at what young entrepreneurs in Erie are doing today, there were always challenges for them to get a seat at the table. The Young Entrepreneur Professionals Association, which is a group of the chamber or entity of the chamber, actually even has a program called Seat at the Table. The idea is the young entrepreneurs weren't getting what they needed out of the system. So guess what they did? They built their own system. They did the things that they needed to do to be successful on their own. And guess what's happening? The system is coming to them and saying, hey, we noticed you're really making a really cool thing over here. The same thing happened with the Beehive, right? The Beehive is collaborative in a very, very interesting way. You think about the 4 universities and the library system, not so much competitive, but you think of the 4 universities, there's some level of competition between those 4 organizations for students and resources and other stuff. But I'll tell you, when we're in meetings with the Innovation Beehive and the leaders, and we've got 3 of the leaders here, Jake Marsh runs the Beehive at Penn State Barron, Brad Gleason runs the Beehive at Gannon, and Brian Fuller runs the Beehive at Mercyhurst. And then we have Tony Perrinell, who runs the Beehive at Edinburgh. They stay in their lanes and they hand things off. It's that trusting relationship that you build with those, to your point, Skylar, you build what you're going to build, and then people start to play. And so from a practical perspective on an entrepreneurial level, one of the things that I learned with my last business partner, the company that we exited, he and I at the first 2-3 years did everything together. We made every decision together. We went to every meeting together. I'd check his emails, he'd check my emails, until finally one of our investors said, hey guys, Brian, why don't you take this 40% and that's yours. David, you take this 40% and that's yours. This 20% in the middle, you guys talk about that stuff. Otherwise, go do what you got to do. And that really helped, right? And so people who don't want to play don't get to play, and you just go do your own thing.
Thank you guys for that. We've only got 10 minutes left, and I want to hit a couple topics, so somewhat rapid fire round if you don't mind. One question came in earlier, and I think it has a system-wide kind of question, which is, it has a lot of relationship to what we're talking about, which is like, if an entrepreneur is at a point where they're kind of stuck, obvious solutions are no longer clear. And particularly right now in the middle of like the pandemic, what do you recommend in your own, in your own system for relieving that kind of paralysis of not knowing what to do next?
I would say talk to other entrepreneurs as regularly as possible. Like, you have a support network, build a support network if you don't already have one, and talk to each other, because being an entrepreneur is the loneliest job, one of the loneliest jobs at least. And none of the problems are exactly the same, but there's a lot of rhyming and you can learn from each other.
One of the most common characteristics of successful entrepreneurs is persistence, and sometimes it's just dogged, stubbornness. But there's a fine line between, stubbornness and insanity. And I think it's important to, to get feedback from mentors. And, as Skylar said, entrepreneurs, one of the great value adds of the accelerators and incubators, in Pittsburgh and other areas too, is, you've got some feedback and guidance from, the mentors, but there's also a tremendous amount of guidance and feedback from other entrepreneurs who are doing, they're struggling with the same things that you're struggling with. And I think that's another great source of feedback.
Yeah, one of the exercises that I do all the time is, for those of you who are familiar with George Costanza, I do the thing that is wrong, that I think is wrong. I do that. To just break me out of I've got to go in this direction. If that isn't producing the results, I do the opposite. And sometimes it works really well. Other times it just opens my eyes to other opportunities. So the thing about getting stuck is you're supposed to be enjoying what's going on. Like, this should be fun, or else why bother, right? If you're chasing dollars, don't. Make sure you're doing something that you really enjoy and play with it. There's no wrong here. Play with it. Get next to all the entrepreneurs get next to those mentors, and do stuff that you wouldn't think is the right way, but it may be the right way.
But another suggestion I'd have, Jake, is if somebody's truly stuck, I think you have to go back. We've all heard Einstein's definition of insanity, trying something over and over and expecting different results. If you're not getting the results you think, I think it's kind of a reality check. You have to go back and reevaluate some of your fundamental business assumptions. Is this group really my customer? Maybe not so much. Maybe it's over here. Do I need to reevaluate my revenue model? Entrepreneurship is more of a process than anything else. And it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of hypothesis, and improving that hypothesis through customer discovery. But if you're truly stuck, I think you just have to go back and kind of regroup and, retest your original business assumptions, and maybe make some tweaks or pivot.
Yeah, pivot or persevere moments are super important. And I'll say I was trying to figure out the right wording for this while everybody was speaking, but entrepreneurs are a lot like cats. So curiosity can kill the cat, but the cat has 9 lives. And after you die a few times and die like you're just experimenting, something goes wrong, you will find a better path. You have to take that process of being curious and taking at least enough of a chance to find out whether it's wrong.
For the sake of the entrepreneurs in the room, but also for the sake of us right now, for food for thought, pandemic, what is in place? What do your systems have in place to try to help entrepreneurs deal with that right now? Or what do you advise in terms of they're dealing with it, but also what can we put in place?
Surprisingly, I'm probably as busy, if not busier, more busy now than pre-COVID. All of our Blue Tree functions moved fairly seamlessly to in face-to-face to virtual. A lot of the activities at the Innovation Institute at the University of Pittsburgh are now virtual, and we're cranking along in both cases. I think COVID as a general statement has created some unique opportunities. There's no question it's created some unique challenges, but I think it also has created some unique opportunities in terms of remote learning, remote medicine, video conferencing. So I think that, true entrepreneurs are looking at their business model and how can I leverage the realities of today to maybe take advantage of a short-term situation to help springboard my company.
Yeah, I'd say that's a very that's a good point. That's salient, and this whole question of COVID, it's a really interesting time because so much has changed, and there's so much sort of economic destruction or uncertainty that's in the air that a world of instability is the world in which entrepreneurs thrive. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, and the people who are set up to learn the fastest, adjust to the new realities the quickest, identify how changes are impacting existing supply chains, whatever it is, those people will have the greatest opportunity coming out. And there are a lot of examples of good entrepreneurs in my community that looked long and hard at the beginning of the pandemic at what they could do differently and what that means for the market as a whole, and really try to capitalize on those changes. So be a good entrepreneur. Totally, just like look for new opportunities in this scenario.
COVID has presented an existential threat to virtually almost every business. And whenever businesses are faced with, change or perish, they're more receptive and open to new ways of doing things. And I think there's that opportunity for entrepreneurs. People typically cut back on their expenses. That's true. But if part of being a successful entrepreneur is being able to tell a story well. So if you can convince people, that your solution is going to help them survive, you're going to have a better chance of success. The customer discovery is probably the biggest challenge with COVID. But, you can still do it over Zoom versus, face-to-face meeting, but it still can be done. But really comes down to, modifying your story to show how it can benefit struggling companies.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for giving your thoughts. Closing thoughts with our last couple minutes. Closing thoughts, Brian?
Well, I say this all the time. Entrepreneurs are the coolest, bravest, craziest people I know. It's so much fun to be around people who are looking at the horizon and figuring out a way to get there. So keep doing what you're doing. I know it's tough. I know it's chaotic. But if you really have fallen in love with the problem, not the solution, but the problem, you will find your way to the solution and you will ultimately have a great time getting there. So just keep at it. We're all here. The whole ecosystem is here and ready and willing and able, and good luck to everybody.
Don?
Yeah. Oh, please.
I like to say I have the best job in Pittsburgh because I get to wear a lot of different hats. One of them is, chairman of Deal Flow for Blue Tree. One is entrepreneur residence at the University of Pittsburgh. And then I volunteer time at the local around town. But the common thread in all the hats I wear is I get to work with entrepreneurs virtually every day. And as Brian and Skylar know, entrepreneurs are not normal people. There's something different about entrepreneurs. They're a little bit like the firefighters. They run into burning buildings when everybody else is running away. Entrepreneurs are looking for rejection and social isolation and all these other things. So they're a different DNA. But entrepreneurs, the reason I love entrepreneurs is they're the ones that change the world. So, you know, follow your passion, understand the resources that are available, and be persistent.
Yeah. Well, and my you know, my thought on this is it also kind of answers Brian's question about you know, whether or not, or how long you found that an entrepreneur can go from idea to market using your service. I generally don't spend my time working with entrepreneurs who are building a massive grand vision and like setting up the 50 different steps that it takes to have that happen. There was a huge gap in the market where people with ideas couldn't you know, get the support they need to test whether it's a legit idea or not. They'd just be told you don't have enough of a business plan. So, and, you know, move along. So, you know, in closing, do what you can to take small steps immediately, as quickly as you can, to learn information about whether or not somebody will pay you for your idea.
Mhm.
Don't ask them whether they like your idea. Ask them what they will pay for it.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Quick announcement of our door prize winner, Selena Uglo. Contact Kathy Roach to get your gift card. But I want to thank the three of you very much for taking time out of your day and joining us. Thank you to everybody who's attending. Please, when this comes out on video, share it with your friends that can get a chance to see it. You know. And feel free, I'm certain all of us would love it if you would contact us with questions that you have, with any follow-up that you have, comments that you have. You can easily get a hold of any of us. We are Googleable pretty easily as well. So, and my email is easy, jakemarsh@psu.edu. Jake Marsh, you'll find me. Or Jacob Marsh, you can even spell it wrong. You'll hit me both ways. So thank you all. And I do encourage everyone, if you have the opportunity this evening at 5 p.m., we will have a humongous panel of resources that are in the Erie community. So all of the beehives will be represented, as well as Bridgeway Capital, the Chamber, the SBDC, the lots of people. So come in and ask your questions to a group of like all these people that you want to meet. That's your chance. And we'll be on for an hour and a half, 5 until 6:30. Until then, happy GEW and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Skylar, Kathy, and Jake. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Love
everybody.
hearing from Erie.
Awesome panel discussion.